Hello fellow Hunters of the Blue, and welcome to my channel, and welcome to the third of a series of videos focused on the most basic aspects of the hobby. You might think this video is not for you, but I encourage you to watch it. You might learn something new or pick a tool or trick you didn't know. In this episode we are going to tackle everything brushes, from types and brands to proper brush usage, and of course the all-important brush care. So get ready for a lot of leaking action, but before, let me talk you about today's video sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare is a community full of passionate people passionate about teaching others, and people passionate about learning new things. Skillshare is full of thousands of amazing classes in any topic you can think of. Let me tell you, I really wish I had Skillshare when I started this channel. Learning to edit my videos was a true challenge, but using video editing with Adobe Premiere Pro for beginners by Jordi Vandenput, it's going to be a breeze. This is by far one of the best video editing classes I've ever seen, so there's no excuse to not start your video editing journey with Skillshare. On top of that, Skillshare now offers Learning Paths. Learning Paths are a series of curated classes designed to help you master a specific skill, like video for social media, create to engage your audience. Skillshare is the largest online learning community full of creatives. This autumn, invest in yourself, starting a learning journey on Skillshare to explore your creativity and find new passions. The first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive 1 month free trial of Skillshare. Get started today. So, thanks again to Skillshare for sponsoring this video, and let's get cracking. Brushes. I have a lot of them, and when I say a lot, I do mean a lot of brushes. Like a lot of brushes, and these are not all of them, not even close. I love brushes. So let's talk about brushes, how to take care of them, how to use them properly, and hopefully you will find something new you didn't know, or a trick or two for your day-to-day painting. First thing we need to talk about when talking about brushes is about the hair. You have basically two options, something like this, which is natural hair. In this case, this is Kolinsky Sable, or something like this. This is a synthetic brush. The hair is made out of plastic and not an animal product. There is also brushes made out of a mix of natural hair and synthetic hair, but to be honest, I just don't see the point in them. I feel like the only reason they are made is to have a cheaper product. So just to essentially cut the amount of natural hair you spend on each brush with synthetic fibers, which are cheaper. But I really don't see the point. If I want natural hair, I prefer the natural hair, and if I want a synthetic brush, I will just go with a pure synthetic brush. If you ask me which is my favorite kind, it's obviously a natural hair brush. Natural hair is just unbeatable in terms of precision, liquid retention, and how the paint flows off of it. Synthetic brushes will never be as good, although they are useful and they're good to have, especially if you're working with oils or with very harsh products. If you're painting just with acrylics, I will always go for a natural hair brush, and if I want to paint oils, I usually go for synthetics. But of course, if you don't want to use natural hair because you don't like to use animal products, that's totally fair, and synthetic brushes will be fine for you. Obviously, the main issue with natural hair brushes, especially with Kolinsky Sable brushes, is that they are very expensive and in some parts of the world hard to get. But there are other options. You don't have to use Kolinsky, you can use a normal red sable brush. They are just as good. This, for example, is a red sable brush. It's not the best quality, but it's not bad. And the hair is almost as good as a Kolinsky, being quite cheaper, and easier to get. A lot of people ask me how much does one brush last you, and that really depends on how much you paint. There are things you can do to extend its life and make sure they are with you for the longest and they perform the best during that time, but a brush is ultimately a disposable product. You have to be prepared to let it go. At some point it will die and you just won't be using it for your normal painting. Something that you need to understand that will happen. These brushes are designed to be used with watercolors, and we don't use watercolors, we use acrylics. What is the difference between acrylics and watercolors? Well, watercolors are always reactivating. If you put water into them, they will reactivate again. Acrylics don't. Acrylics, once they dry, they basically turn into plastic. That's why they are called acrylic paints. So a Kolinsky brush used for watercolors, we will always be able to take the paint that gets into the ferrule here out of the ferrule at any point without any damage to the brush. But with acrylics, you can almost see it here, how it has a dark ring around. This brush is almost ready to be disposed of. This is very near to the point where I won't use it for any precision painting anymore. Once paint starts getting into the ferrule, it dries there, and once it dries there, the hairs just tend to split and they don't go back and the brush is no longer useful. There are products that claim they can take the paint out and clean the brush deeply, but what I found is all of those products, what they will do is also soften up the glue that holding the bristles together, creating a shape that will no longer get a sharp point anymore, no matter what I do. So for me, once a brush gets to this stage, I dispose of it. But that's not the death of a brush. Here is a box full of brushes that are no longer useful for their original purpose. That doesn't mean that the brush needs to die. No, brushes have a long life. Look at this old Rosemary and Co Series 33, Series 8 actually, okay, is absolutely destroyed, but I still use it if I need to put white glue on a base, or if I need to do a very rough base coat, or if I need to mix paint in my airbrush cup. A brush has multiple lives. It's good to have a big reservoir of old brushes on hand. Let's talk about brands. There are 3 brands that are my favorite. We have Rosemary & Co, either the Series 8 or the Series 33. Both series are great, but the Series 33 is cheaper and just as good, so I would highly suggest you get the Series 33. Then we have Raphael 8404s and of course Winsor & Newton Series 7. These are my 3 favorite brands. I want to give right now an honorable mention and a quick shout out to one of my favorite brush brands that is sadly no longer with us. This is Broken Toad. I still have some of the Mark III Kolinsky sables. These brushes were excellent, and if you can get your hands into an old set, do it. They are great. They have a great tip, the hair quality is fantastic, and they were made with a lot of love and very carefully, and it really shows. These were excellent. It's a shame that, well, they're no longer made. I know some of you are going to ask me about Artis Opus brushes. I have one here, and my recommendation is to not buy them. Why? Well, because Artis Opus are made by Rosemary & Co. This is the company that makes the brushes for Artis Opus. Artis Opus is just a reseller. And although the tip and the configuration of the tip is not the same between the Series 33 or the Series 8 or any of the series and the Artis Opus, the Series 33 is close enough, and they are about a third to half the price depending on the brush size. And if you ask me, that is a discount that you cannot ignore. there is no reason, especially if you live in the UK, to buy Artis Opus. Just buy Rosemary. Outside the UK, getting Rosemary can be a little bit difficult, and given the case, I would straight up jump onto Raphael or Winsor & Newton, especially Raphael, because they are a higher quality than Rosemary and thus Artis Opus, and they are about the same price, so I don't see any reason why anyone wouldn't buy a Raphael 8404 instead of a Artis Opus. If we talk about synthetic brushes brands, it doesn't matter. They are all the same, it's just plastic, it doesn't matter what you're going to use. I haven't found any that are extremely good. My recommendation is you get very cheap ones and dispose of them quickly. Once they start losing the tip, throw them away and take another one out of the pack. Those packs that come like with 20 or 30 brushes are ideal. You start painting with one, once it gets off or it just doesn't have any tip, you throw them away and get a new brush. I had great experiences, although I don't have any one of those here, with the white Games Workshop synthetic brushes. They are quite decent, although I'm pretty sure that being Games Workshop the price won't be very competitive. But if you want like a more premium alternative, I would probably go with them. Another good synthetic brush alternative is these Vallejo brushes that they send me. They are pretty good. They're not perfect, they are still synthetic brushes, not natural hair. They do have a natural hair option, but because we're discussing, animal cruelty-free products, this is a good solution. These are absolutely great. This is the detail range, and I highly recommend them. Let's move on to the subject of dry brushing brushes. Traditionally, in the olden days, we would dry brush using something like this, a flat brush. This was what we did when I was young. But nowadays, this is old-fashioned. This is antiquated technology. Now, we use brushes like this, soft, makeup-like brushes that leave a very smooth and a very beautiful result. I have a couple tiers here. We have the not so good tier. Things here are like the Vallejo brushes and the Army Painter ones. They're not bad. They are alright. But if you spend just a little bit more, we have things like the Rosemary & Co. Again, this is the company that makes the Artis Opus dry brushes, so I would highly recommend you buy the Rosemary & Co. It's the model dry brush before you buy Artis Opus. The price is quite similar. I will let you into a little secret. It wasn't always the case. In fact, they were about half the price, but suddenly they jumped up in price once Artis Opus got mad. So they are pricey, but they are excellent. But my favorite dry brush set right now is the ARTIFY Drybrush Set. This one. We have the 5-piece dry brush set for miniatures and models. And I have a link to this in the description. It's an affiliate Amazon link, so just know that I will get a commission each time you buy a set. The same for the Rosemary. I will leave a link to Rosemary webpage in the description, and I also am affiliate with Rosemary. So these are very cheap and, to me, just as good as the Rosemary and thus as the Artis Opus. And you can get this set for, the last time I checked, about 30 euros, which is an incredible deal. And it also comes with a little tub with a sponge, very useful, and of course the soap. So this is a complete set with a nice case and soap and a sponge. This is absolutely magnificent, and I highly recommend you get this. You have seen me use this in videos several times, and even though they did sponsor me, that's how I actually got to know this brand, they are not sponsoring me anymore, and I still use them in my videos all the time. I love this set. Let's talk about what happens when you buy a brand new brush. This is a brand new Series 33 size 3. Probably my favorite brush in the world in terms of brand, model and size. This is the brush that I use for absolutely everything, and I've been using for my heavy contrast for years and all of my painting in general. I buy them in bulk from Rosemary and I import them here. Brushes come with this little protector. I highly recommend you don't throw this away. You see my brush collection, they all have their protectors on, and this is very important that you don't throw them away, because this will prevent accidents. It will prevent you messing up the tip accidentally and all that stuff that you don't want to happen. So we take our cap off, and brushes come with the tips hard. I don't know if you can see that, but it's not bulging and it's not moving. The difference between an used brush, you see, it's soft, while this is hard. That's because brushes come starched. That means they are submerged in a starch with water mixture, and once dry, it's hard, but we can't use them this way. The first thing you need to do is take the starch out of the brush. What I like to do is submerge it and press it against the wall like this and roll it around. Depending how much starch it's in the brush, you will see a little mist. I don't know if you can see it there. You can see it right there. It's a little mist in the water. That's the starch releasing from the bristles, and we need to wash this brush thoroughly, just in water. You don't need to use soap at this stage, but we need to make sure that all of the starch is removed from the brush before we use it. Like this. I simply press it against the side of the glass. Make sure it's a clean glass, obviously not a filthy water cup we've been using for weeks without cleaning it. And then we take the water out and we have a nice soft brush. There you go. Talking about using a brand new brush, a lot of people are scared about using a brush, especially expensive ones. And I get it. You spend 20 euros, 15 euros on a brush, and you are scared of using it because you think you're going to mess it up, or you save it for something special. I don't see the point. Brushes are tools and we have to use them. Don't be scared about the tool. I'm going to try and give you a couple of tips to make a brush last for way longer, and I will show you what I do to preserve my brushes and what I recommend you do to preserve the brushes, which is not the same thing, because you know how this goes. Let's talk a little bit more about the basics of using a brush. I know this might sound very irrelevant for you if you've been painting for a while, and I might tend to agree, but you would be surprised how many people are having just issues about how do we hold the brush, how do we load the brush, how do I get brush control, and all of those things that are basic questions, but they are important to answer. Once you have a brush that you've been using for a while, it's dry like this. This is a dry brush. It has no moisture in it whatsoever. This brush is the brush that we just cleaned off the starch off, so it has water in it. You see, when I poke it, the tip holds, while this just splits because there is no moisture in it to hold the bristles together. You should never dip a dry brush into paint, especially liquidy paints like contrast, express, or washes, stuff like that that is very liquid. If you put a dry brush into that, because this is a lot of small hairs bunched up together, the capillary action will push that paint straight into the ferrule. Like, there is nothing in between the paint and the delicate ferrule, and it will just seep in and destroy the brush very quickly. That's one of the things that kills brushes the fastest. Never dip a dry brush into any kind of paint, not even thick paint. Please don't do it. The only brushes you should do that with is dry brushes, and even then it's highly recommended that the hair is slightly moist, so you get a softer dry brush and a better result altogether. So the first thing we have to do is dip the brush into water and make sure we get water into this section of the brush. Water needs to be there, and then after that we can take a paper towel or our mouth. I usually use my mouth, but you can use a paper towel if you're not as disgusting as I am, and take out the excess moisture of the brush, leaving us a perfect formed tip and a perfect brush for our needs. Let's talk about how we should load our brushes and the best practices to not destroy them. So let's put a random bit of paint. This is beige red, in case you were wondering, from Vallejo model color, and let's load our brush. The key thing is that paint should never be higher than about half of the bristle size of our brush. Paint should never get past this point, and because we have moisture here, we will prevent any paint, or at least as much as we physically can, from entering the ferrule and ruining our brush. But you know, getting our brush super wet and then just punching it into paint and doing this is the reason why your brushes don't last. Don't do that. I can do it because I am a professional, but you shouldn't. So let's repeat that, but doing things properly. You want to be gentle when loading a brush, and you don't want to overthin your paint. So I usually take a little corner and just spread it out. If I'm using a wet palette, I don't need to add any water apart from the moisture in the brush itself. If I'm using a dry palette, then you probably need to add just a teeny tiny touch of water, but we will talk about wet palettes and palettes in general in the next episode of this series. So once I have my brush loaded, you can see it there. You see how the paint stops here. This is the perfect load on the brush. And that's why I also like large brushes. Size 3 and above, or 2 and above depending on the brand, is usually my favorite, because it's big enough that I can load a bunch of paint in here, so it's going to last for quite a while, but the bristles are long enough that I'm not risking paint getting where I don't want it. Holding a brush should feel natural for you, but if it doesn't, this is how I do it and how I recommend. This is commonly the best position to hold the brush. You should have your fingers in this thicker section. You see how the handle goes from thin, starts getting thicker up to this point, and then thin again, and the ferrule starts. The thicker point of the brush is where you should hold it. Don't hold it backwards like here. You will have no control. It's very difficult to control a brush like this. You will lose precision, and if you go here, it's just very uncomfortable, and it starts to get uncomfortable once you touch the ferrule, and it can even get messy, and you know, you can get your fingers dirty. You can risk of touching the bristles with your hands, which will get them greasy. You don't want that. This is the perfect position and the perfect solution. Of course, people with some kind of disability might not be able to hold the brush like this, and sometimes a brush with this configuration, like this Army Painter brush with a triangle, will help you position the fingers better and get a better grip if you have some kind of physical issue in your hand which prevents you from holding a brush well. There are also products that will, you know, attach to the brush and help you grip it properly. Once we have a good grip and a perfectly loaded brush, just like this. If you have issues about thinning paint, I have a full video just about thinning paint. Once you have our brush perfectly loaded and our grip fine, you also see that because my brush is very big, my paint stays wet for a long time. Look at this, still wet. And I've been talking for a while. There is a way to use our brush that is better than others. This is something that people don't really understand, but our hand and our arm is designed to make very precise movements like this, in this direction, up to down, just like this. We are very good at doing lines like that, and we are very precise with this brush stroke. So whenever you can, use the brush in this motion. So if you see someone doing something very precise like a freehand, they will always be turning the model around, so they can always do this vertical motion. This is all they do. They don't do it this. This is awful for humans. It's very difficult to get good control and good grip and a good precision if we try to do a line like this. This is absolutely painful, and if you try to do it, you will see how it's way more difficult to get the line. I promise you, I'm not faking this. It's super hard to make a straight line doing a horizontal lines. Always up to down, always up to down. This motion is what you want to. Let's talk about brush control, because that's a question that will always pop up. What do I do if I want to get better at brush control? Well, the solution is simple and difficult at the same time. I would recommend you paint a specific type of model in a specific way, and I found that that recipe is always the best one for getting good quickly with brush controls. What are the models? Space Marines. And I highly suggest you paint them in a very heavy metal style. I suggest you go and watch Infernal Brush video. He's an ex-heavy metal painter, and he has a video about how to paint ultramarines. I think it's his most popular video. Go and watch it and try to copy it. And try to copy it doing lines as thin as he does them. And I suggest to learn brush control, you do it with this. Large brush, learn how to use just the very tip, and try to copy heavy metal painting on Space Marines. I know, but that's the truth. And truth sometimes is painful. We've talked about loading a brush and using a brush when it's a normal brush, but we also need to talk about dry brushing and the best practices. As we saw, some of the modern dry brush kits come with a little sponge. You put some drops of water here and use this to moisten up your brush. But what I've also found is that putting your paint on a wet palette and just, touching your brush on the sponge here a little bit, and then on the wet palette a little bit, it moistens it up pretty nicely. The thing is that the brush not being dry makes the result less powdery, less chalky. So let's get a little bit of this paint, and I've been also lately just doing this on my wet palette, not on a paper towel. This is what people usually tell you to use: paper towel. Just rub it on the paper towel like this. But I found this, again, dries up the brush way too much. So what I usually do is I do it on my wet palette and then on my finger until I see I have a good result. Or if you have a textured palette, use the textured palette. And then I can start applying paint on my model. And because the brush is slightly damp and I've been very careful, I can create incredibly smooth blends very easily. Obviously, I'm not an expert at a dry brush, and if you want, the Artist Opus channel videos are absolutely amazing. And like this, we can create incredibly smooth blends with a dry brush, just like that. Look at how smooth, clean, and not powdery or dusty or chalky looking, nothing like that. And we can even use this with a little bit more paint to stipple paint in, so we have a thicker layer. This is a technique that it's so versatile. Look at that. How soft and smooth that looks. That is pretty cool. Obviously, once you're done with the dry brushing, you have to clean the brush. And again, I find this motion against the side of the glass or your whatever you use to clean your brushes is the best. It helps to get the paint out of the bristles very quickly. And if you've used the dampen brush technique I just showed you, paint will come out very easily instead of getting like crusty and, you know, stick to the bristles, just like that. And now we can go to the paper towel and make sure we dry our brush very well. Obviously, if you are changing colors, you wouldn't do this. You would just mix it with your brush and keep on going. But once you're done, this is the perfect result. And you see, no paint has gotten stuck into the bristles. It's as good as new. And I've been using this for quite a while. One of the questions I usually get asked the most is, what do I do to preserve my brushes? And I'm going to show you to you. This is literally what I do. Once I'm done painting, I put it in the water, agitate it and clean it, usually also against like the side, like that. And then I take it, I do this. Form a sharp tip, take my cap, put it in the brush very carefully, like this, and I do this. That's all I do about brush care. And this last step is more important than you think, because one of the worst things you can do is store your brushes vertically. If you store them vertically, like this, with the tips up, the very slightly paint tinted water will flow downwards and get onto the ferrule. Best way of storing them would be upside down, so the paint goes in the other direction and doesn't go into the ferrule. But alternatively, because storing your brushes upside down is not for everyone, just laying them down flat on a table is good enough. But because I am a good teacher, I'm going to show you what you should do, you, not me, to clean your brushes. Here we have brush soap. This is the one that comes with the ARTIFY brushes, but you can just use a master's brush cleaner. So once you have this, what you do is take water here and roll your brush always backwards, never forwards. You don't want to do this. You want to move the brush in this direction and roll it around until it starts to get, you know, soapy in here, like this, just like that. See? Now what I usually like to do is to rub it with my fingers while I'm twisting, just like that, always in this motion, always in the direction of the brush. And lastly, I just clean it in clean water. You clean it like this, make sure there is no soap left. I have my brush clean. I do this. And the saliva actually preserves the hair very well. But if you don't feel comfortable doing that, what you can do is just a final pass on the soap, like this. Form the tip very well with your fingers, like that, and leave it to dry. You need the soap to dry on the brush and hold it together. What you will have to do before you paint again is the same process that we did when the brush was new, because you don't want soap into your paint, so you will have to go back to your water once this is dry. Take all of the soap residue out and your brush will be ready for painting. Thank you for watching till the end what's probably one of my most boring videos I've ever made. I really appreciate it. The next video in the series will be everything paint palettes, so I hope you're all hyped for that for some reason. Thank you for watching this video, and don't forget that if you like my videos and want to help me make them, you can follow me on social media. You have the links to all my social media in the description below and in the pinned comment of this video. Share and like this video, but most importantly, there is Patreon and channel members. Patrons and members allow me to do all the cool videos that I want to make, and most importantly, they allow me to release them for free here on YouTube. Perks include access to an amazing Discord community full of lovely people, access to many more Patreon exclusive videos, and now also private one-on-one online tutorings. Help me enjoy the list of the coolest persons in the planet, including Anthony Panullo, Victor Stigart, The Salty Squire, Tomato A, Jared Hughes, Mathiora666, Graham D, Rob Jewett, Jess Grant, Eric McKenzie, Daniel McCormack Smelt, MacAngry, MacG, Dave Griffiths, Victor, Eric, Paint the Baneblade Eric, Paint the Baneblade, Cory Trickler, Lugubrious Carnhon, Are Drus, Soil CFF, Emilio Engix, 3Gs, Marco Parastic, James Coplin, Rogelio Thomas, Geek Daddy, Wandering Paria, Quintango, TTSS Productions, Jake Hoover, Minis by Benjeline, Emily Queen of Sloths, Nicholas Davis, Agon David, Pablo Cuesta, Benjamin Barbet, Pumpkin Hill, Chris Black, Jacob Matheus Babiuk, Andrew Michensko, Aaron Miller, Jack Stein, Stefan Zimmerman, Andrew Walden, Tom, Dr. Mike, Martin Reverois, Sheshual, PJA, Matt Wallace, Mac Carter, Henrik Chester Ross, Adam Foots, Tyler Hughes, Chris G, Allman Gaming, Spicy Joe, Mark Watson, Hamish Donald, Matthew Lang, Iñigo Garcia, Star Wars Estabro, Mark G, Mark Requeira, Romain Ars Miniatura, Josh Rex, Dr. Cathaber, Angelos Alexos, Des, Giuseppe Nicola Ancona, Mark Valencoub, Felix Franke, Aaron Bernstein, Damil Ramin, Bolsey, Terry Dunham, Pludge, Biom, Howard Holby, Stephanie All, Richard St. Pierre, Michael Wakeman, Stephen Rockford, Roger Nelson, Oscar Jonathan Torbeck, Nick Nguyen, Dan Mako Kristalios, Bartosz Spadensky, Kevin Miad, Dusty Farrar, Natius Maximus, Javi Mota, Emon Patton, Adam Thaxton, Kojia74, Heather Amstead, Mark Arkison, Maja, Chris Fergal, Josh Simpson, Christoph Moret, G-Force, Dr. V, Nat Lindemann, Kieran Walter, Andrew Dyer, and Kevin Sulas. That's for me. I will catch you in the next one. Bye.